Welcome back to Science Lab. The signs are happening because Jesus is coming. Before the break, we asked you the trivial question of the day, and the question was, who is the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
And the options are option A, Theresa May, option B, Boris Johnson, option C, Jeremy Hunt.
The correct answer is option B, Boris Johnson. Influential BBC News programs like Today and Question Time are notoriously anti-Brexit. Whilst both programs feature pro-Brexit personalities, the pro-Brexit figures are nearly always outnumbered by Remainers, generally have less time to speak and are subject to much stronger scrutiny and pushback.
This is shocking, considering a majority of nations voted to leave Europe. The BBC simply refuses to report in a positive manner on the democratic will of the majority of the British public.
Meanwhile, it's keen and quick to report, often melodramatically, on the slightest hint or suggestion that Brexit could have negative consequences. It is now routine to hear people expressing dismay at the BBC for its Brexit coverage. Frankly, the BBC has become the supporter of a foreign organization called the EU, opined former Conservative MP Lord Norman Tebbit last year. It's not just the BBC. Except for 2 or 3 tabloids, Britain's media actively undermines Brexit across the board. Often, this means engaging in sinister attacks on Brexit figures and organizations like Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party. The list of those who use social media, TV, and the papers to undermine Brexit and slander Brexiters read like a who's who of Britain's elite. It includes former Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, top sports stars including Gary Lineker, former footballer and a top BBC talent, and global icon Sir David Attenborough. Then there's the Treasury and the Bank of England. The Treasury is the government department responsible for managing the UK's economy and finances. Ahead of the June 2016 referendum, it attempted to frighten people from voting for Brexit with relentless warnings that leaving the EU would cause an immediate and profound economic shock and would plunge the nation into terrible recession. In fact, the UK economy grew in both 2016 and 2017, and unemployment, instead of rising dramatically as the Treasury forecast, fell. Since June 2016, the Treasury has delivered one Jeremiah after another, and for 3 years, Britain's economy has defied the forecast and remained strong and healthy. Charles Moray recently opined that the Treasury is so anti-Brexit that it tries to weaken the British economy to prove its own dismal forecasts right.
It's the same with the Bank of England, Britain's central bank. This bank, wrote Sir Paul Marshall in the Financial Times in January, has now come to embody anti-Brexit cognitive bias to such a degree that it endangers its credibility as an institution. The Bank of England's predictions about the negative consequences of Brexit were so far adrift as to be embarrassing, he wrote.
There is also the civil service, comprised of thousands of employees in an assembly of government departments who are responsible for advising the government and executing the decisions of cabinet leaders. Britain's civil services has a wonderful legacy of efficiency and order. The civil service was the engine that kept the British Empire purring. Today, many are concerned that the civil service is filled with the Remainers who, instead of setting aside their personal views and executing the will of the British public, are working to undermine Brexit and keep Britain in the EU.
This article from an active civil servant is distressing. As a civil servant, I can tell you large parts of the Whitehall machine are systematically working against leaving the EU, it says. I have met thousands of civil servants in the past few years. I can only recall 5 who voted for Brexit. Others, including respected journalists such as Charles Moray and Alison Pearson, as well as politicians such as Conservative MP Sir John Redwood, have expressed similar fears. I don't generally set much store by talk of establishment conspiracies. History teaches us that more things arise from human error than collusion. Still, over the past week, it has been hard to suppress a crawling feeling that we are approaching the climax of a powerful and well-coordinated plot to thwart the democratic will of the British people as expressed in the referendum on June 23, 2016, wrote Pearson last November. She wrote that a coup is being staged by civil servants against the British people. We have just hit 2,000 words and I haven't even discussed Britain's mainstream political parties. The past 3 years have furnished an enormous volume of evidence proving that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party have large contingents that simply do not want Brexit. Many politicians talk about accomplishing the will of the people and leaving the EU, but they are infused with the spirit of the deep state and refuse to take action to uphold the rule of law and democracy.
The ultimate power behind UK's deep state is revealed by the prophecy in Revelations 21, which says explicitly that Satan, the devil, would in the end time be cast down to earth. Biblical passages such as 2 Corinthians 4 verse 4 and Ephesians 2 verse 2 clearly reveal the presence of the devil in world affairs.
What did Satan and his demons do after they were confined to earth? Again, the Bible reveals in Revelation chapter 12, verses 13 and 14, that his first target was God's church.
But he didn't stop with the church. After that, he directed his attack against physical Israel. And who is that? Specifically, it is 3 of the modern nations that descended from the biblical nation of Israel, chiefly the United States, Britain, and the Jewish state.
This understanding about Revelation chapter 12 and Satan the devil being cast down sheds so much light on Brexit. Thanks to Bible prophecy, we can really understand what's happening with Brexit. Satan the devil is using the deep state to try and keep Britain locked in the European Union.
This prophecy explains the political situation in Britain, which is almost surreal. The deep state's refusal to leave the EU is destroying the British people's faith in the government. It is inflicting irreparable damage on the greatest parliamentary democracy in the world, and it has set the nation on the path to collapse.
All these show that what is mentioned in the Bible that are going to take place in the end times are taking place in our lifetime. We are living in the last days. Lord Jesus Christ is coming back very soon.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Science Lab, and don't forget to tune in next time. Remember, the signs are happening because Jesus is coming. Maranatha.
Maranatha.